Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Well, after the last video that I did on fire safety with your model railroad, there were a number of comments that indicated to me that a lot of folks don't really understand DCC circuit breakers, what they are, what they do, how you can use them. So what I want to do today is cover that topic. So I've got three of the most popular ones that I would recommend that you take a look at, and I'll go over each one. We'll go through some of the details, and I'll show you some diagrams on how to set them up and give you some other tips. So let's go ahead and get started with the video. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Okay, one of the first things that I do want to touch on before we talk about circuit breakers per se is a question that came in from at least one individual. And he asked specifically, if you had a short circuit on your model railroad and your booster was shutting down and coming back on and cycling power continually, how long could that go on? And what would happen if it just kept going on for a long period of time? Well, unfortunately, the manufacturers of this equipment don't say a lot about that. Matter of fact, I've only found one occasion where a manufacturer did talk about the consequences of it. And let me read you what they said. And what I have here is from the instruction manual for the SB5 Smart Booster. It's a 5-amp booster, and you can get it for your model railroad. But I also found the same thing in another one of their boosters. I think it was their 8-amp or 10-amp booster. So this seems to be a fairly consistent thing that they say about all of their boosters. And here's what they say. Do not allow a long-term short circuit to persist for more than 3 or 4 minutes, or damage may result. Now, by damage, I assume they mean damage to the booster itself, that it's going to burn some component out and it's not going to work anymore for you. So that hopefully will answer your question. And that also pretty much gives me an introduction or a segue into why you should use a circuit breaker. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so what is a DC circuit breaker? Well, it's not one of these here like you're used to seeing in the panel box in your house. Probably somewhere in your basement, maybe in your kitchen, if you've got an apartment or something like that. And it's basically a device that has a on-off switch on it. And when a short circuit occurs in your house, such as when you turn on your toaster and your coffee maker at the same time, and you exceed the current rating of the circuit, then eventually this sucker will trip. And you have to go open up the panel box and reset it in order to get the circuit to work again. And that's something like what a DCC circuit breaker does. However, these things are like turtles compared to how fast one of these other electronic circuit breakers do work. So I'm going to bring you in here so you can see what I've got here. I've got, as I said, 3 different ones that I want to show you and go over. And for that, you need to get a close look at them. So come on in. So circuit breakers are very fast-acting electronic devices, and they go between your booster and your DCC power bus. So if a short circuit occurs on your model railroad, they're going to trip before it can do any damage to your very expensive booster. So that's really what a DC circuit breaker does. It really protects your booster from damage from these long-term short circuits. There's another way that you can use these though, and I'll get to that in a minute. So the way these work is you would feed power from your booster in here, and then you would have 2 wires going out that would be your DCC power bus. And then if a short occurs, then this will automatically kill power. They will evaluate the short circuit and they will attempt to reconnect to your track. And depending on the device, they will do that different amounts of time, and then they will go into a complete trip and kill power. Now most of these, it's almost instantaneous when they do that. Now these require you to set a trip current. So you might have a 5 amp booster, and you might have 2 different blocks on your layout protected by a circuit breaker, one for each, and you want to set your trip current for that block. So if you've got, say, a 5 amp booster, you might want to set one for 3 amps and one for 2 amps. Or you might set them both for 3 amps, and they will share the power that way. That trip current setting is very important for some of these. And you can set it across a range. And here with the EB1, this is the EB1 from NCE, they have these jumpers. Now, on the newer version, they have a dip switch setting here. So you've got a little switch that you can set in order to set the amperage for your trip current. And these can go up to as much as, I believe, 10 amps. And they showed quite well in the instructions how to set these up for given amounts of current. And what they will do is they will, like I said, they will check, see if you've got a short, kill power, and then keep trying to reset it. Now, the really nice thing about all of these is that they allow you to set up what's called a manual reset. And what that means is after the short occurs and this trips off, then if you have a push button attached to this device, and I'll show you in a minute a diagram for that, then it will automatically shut power off to the track, and it will not come back on until you push that manual reset push button. And that's a great thing to have, because if you get into a situation where you're distracted and you don't see that you've got a short circuit on your layout and it keeps cycling on and off like that for 3 or 4 minutes, NCE says that can damage your booster. But if you've got a manual reset set up, then it would automatically cut power to the track, and it would not come back on until you push that manual reset button. So it really gives you an extra level of protection on your model railroad. And I would recommend everyone consider going with the manual reset option. And all 3 of these offer that. And I'll show you the diagrams in a second. Now, the other thing with this one here is it has you can change a CV setting internally to control the amount of time or the delay that occurs before the circuit is shut off. And you can do that for various reasons, but you want it to trip fairly quickly and be very sensitive to your short circuits. However, if you've got some other device like a frog juicer out on the layout, you want the frog juicer to have enough time to do its thing before this kills power. Okay? And that's how you would use the timing effect or the timing settings in order to make sure that the frog juicer has enough time to reset the frog polarity before this one trips. And then this one has to be longer than your booster before it will shut down. So it's a cascade type of thing. You always want the frog juicer to work first, then you want this thing to work next, and then your booster as a final resort would kill power. And as I remember, if you're looking at the PSXX on Tony's Train Exchange, they have a write-up there, a couple of write-ups about how these work with the frog juicers. Okay, let's take a look at that diagram for this guy right here, for the EB1. Okay, so looking at this, you can see at the bottom, they show you the switches that are available for setting your trip current. And this is from the instruction sheet for the one that has the dip switch, as opposed to the jumpers that I showed you on mine, which is a slightly older unit. And then up at the top, they show you how you can use a normally open push button attached to these 2 terminals, 1 and 2, on the circuit board. And when a manual reset is required, you would just hit that little push button and it would reset, assuming you've removed the short circuit from the layout. And then right next to that, there's connectors 3 and 4, and there you can attach an LED. And what that would do is it would come on. You could use, say, a red LED on your control panel, and it would come on indicating that a short circuit has occurred and you need to hit that manual reset button. So it's a really nice little feature built into these. There's other things, this onboard status LED, a setup button, things like that. But for the most part, that's what you're interested in, the switches to set your trip current, and that's covered in the instructions. Very easily shows you how you can set these little dip switches one way or the other to get a number of different trip current values. And then, of course, the manual reset option. So that is the EB1. And I knew people were going to ask me, so I looked up the latest prices on these. And I checked a couple of different places. You could get these at Iron Planet Hobbies. You can get these, of course, from dealers off of eBay. And they were going in around $35, something in that range for the EB1. So a very reasonable price point for that circuit breaker. Okay, let's take a look at this one right here. The next one up, the IPCB. And this is made by DCC Concepts. And what they have, it's similar in many ways to the functionality of the EB1. You can see over here they've got a series of little connectors, jumpers, and you can just move this little blue jumper right here to any one of these. And it can set it for 1.25 amps, 2 amps, 2.75, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5 amps. So that all you have to do is move the jumper. No CV programming at all, anything like that. Okay, this end right here, your power feed comes in from your booster, and then this goes out to your DCC power bus wiring. Okay, so you've got those two. The other things that we have here that are important, right here is a manual reset button. So this particular unit, it will try to reestablish power. It will kill power and try to reestablish 5 times in a row. And then after that, it will go into a complete shutdown. And in order to start it up again, you have to hit this little black reset button. So it's got a built-in manual reset button right here. But also here, it has connections for an external switch as well as an external LED, just like on the EB1. And let's look real quickly here. Oh, and one other thing. In order to change the sensitivity of the unit to a short, so you would just put a screwdriver in this little guy, give it a little tweak, and change the sensitivity. You don't have to do a lot of CV programming using this particular setup. A lot of it is built in with jumpers and with a little trim pot for adjusting your timing. Okay, let's take a look at the wiring for this one. Okay, so you can see right here, they've used one of their own alpha switches that has a red-green LED display built in, and then you just connect it as they show here, the extension reset switch. So that's your manual reset switch that could be on your control panel or on your fascia somewhere. And then right next to it is the connection for the LED. So the LED will flash if there's a short on the output of the circuit breaker, and you have to press the button to do the manual reset. Very easy, very straightforward way to go about this. And for you guys in the UK, this is a really great option. I checked, it's right now selling for £66 and some change. Here in the US, but that's without tax, of course. Here in the US, this is going for around $89, $90. And that's, again, because of the tariffs. It's a 20% tariff on this because it's made in China. And in addition to that, the dollar is at a very, very low point right now. It's something like $1.36 to the pound. So it costs a lot extra to import these at this point. So for the UK guys, this is a great option. For the US guys, if you really like it, you might want to shell out the extra bucks if you have them these days. Okay, so that's the DCC Concepts DCC circuit breaker. So let's look at the big boy over here on my left. Oh, you're right. This particular one, this is the PSXX, and I've done a video on this in the past, And it's a really nice device. It is a step up from the old PSXX, and they completely changed how it responds, because what happens is when a short occurs on the layout, it immediately limits the current to whatever you've preset the current to. So if you set the trip current to 2 amps, then this will make sure the amperage going to your track is no more than 2 amps. Okay, so it's going to protect whatever's going on that track and protect your decoders and other equipment there, because it's going to limit the current. And then it sits there and evaluates it, and I'm saying it sits there. In the blink of an eye, really, all this happens. But it sits there and it takes a look at what's going on with this short circuit, and it decides whether or not it is a real short circuit or not. And so then, after it has determined that it is a short, then it kills power to the track. It is a very complex in that respect, because it does have so many options for you. Because in addition to be a circuit breaker, it also can be a block occupancy detector, and you can use it for a lot of other things there. And let me point out that if you go to tonystrains.com and look up PSXX, there are a dozen or more write-ups, little tips and tricks write-ups on their website for using the PSXX in different situations and how to wire it up for various types of uses. So I strongly recommend that with all of these, that you go to their website and download the manuals for these, because get an idea of how they work. And I always recommend that for any piece of DCC equipment, that you download a copy of the manual. They're just about all available in PDF forms, and you can read the manual and decide whether or not it sounds like it is far, far too complex for you to handle. Sometimes devices are very simple, like the EB1, and some do a lot more with what you get for the money here. So that's one thing you need to take a look at and see if you can use all of these different features. But the great thing about this is it limits the current going to the track no matter what. When you set it for 2 amps, you're not going to see more than 2 amps getting through this circuit board and getting to your track. And that's a very important thing, because you don't want to zap any of your decoders or any of your other equipment on the layout with too high an amperage flowing through those wires and out to the tracks. Okay, let's take a look at the diagram for how you wire this up. Okay, so this is the PSX illustrated diagram, as you can see. So you can see you've got various diodes. There's the D12 green that indicates that you've got power in. The D7 on the right there, green LED, that indicates you got power going out. And then you've got LEDs D17 and D18 indicating whether or not a trip current has been reached and whether you've got a short, things of that nature. And these are all explained in detail in the instruction sheet. And by the way, let me point out, for this, there are 2 instruction sheets. There's one instruction sheet that's about 5 or 6 pages long, and then there's another one that's over 20 pages long, I think. And so you want the really long one if you want to get a feeling for how this thing really works. Down on the bottom, there are jumpers that, as you can see, jumper 7 on the left, jumper 7-3 and 4 is for your auto manual reset. Now, one thing about this one, this does not use a normally open push button. It uses a normally closed push button. So be aware of that. They sell a push button switch to use with this, or you can get it from Jameco, Mauser, DigiKey, or off of eBay or Amazon. All of those places would sell them. And there's also various ways on here to add a LED. And there is a diagram on Tony's Trains showing you how to go about setting up an LED in case of a short circuit on the layout. Now, another important thing that's kind of neat and unique to this device is, if you look up right on that yellow circle up on the upper right quadrant, it says Optional Sonalert Connection. And what you can do is get a little piezo speaker that goes in there, and you solder it to the board in those connections. And when a short circuit occurs, this buzzer will go off and you will want to turn that unit off very quickly. Just like I showed you on the Digitrex equipment where it beeps 4 times when it's got a short circuit, this one is going to sound off and give you an audible alert when you get a short circuit somewhere on the layout. And like I said, they sell the SonAlert speaker that you install here. So that's something that you can, it's about $7. It's not very expensive at all, and it's a very easy solder job to put one on the board there. So that's all of the different things. And you'll notice over here on the right-hand side at jumper 6, you can use jumpers here to set various trip currents. So you can have a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4 amps just using jumpers that you solder here on those little connections there on the board at J6. But you can also set your trip current using CV49 programming. So you have the option. If you feel comfortable using CV49 program, you can do that. Or if you feel comfortable soldering to that circuit board, you can connect your jumpers there, and that sets the trip current. So pretty straightforward in that respect. But like I said, there's a lot of other stuff on here. Download a copy of the larger manual and take a look. So all of these, typically they will try to reset every 2 to 4 seconds and reconnect power to your truck. And then that's when you want to have that manual reset option connected to these boards. Because I really can't say how important I think it would be to be able to shut power off and keep it off until you actually have checked out the source of the short circuit and removed it from the layout. You really don't want to have an incident on your layout where you get a dead short at some closed points or something of that nature, a derail, and you don't have any way to cut your power off to your booster, and it just sits there and burns up on you, because they're not cheap to replace. Well, that's it for today's video. As I said, go to the websites, NCE DCC, Tony'sTrains.com, and of course, DCCConcepts.com. And take a look at the instructions and the manuals for these various devices and get a feeling for which one you would feel most comfortable with and which one would be the most use on your model railroad, because that's really what you're in this for. And you know, protection can run anywhere from $35 to about $55 for each PSXX board, up to $90 for the IPCB. So it's a range of prices, a range of protection, and the more it costs, the more it's going to do for you. So take a look at those. Websites, and I'll put those websites in the description in case you didn't have time to write them down. And in the meantime, have a great week and a great weekend, and I'll see you here next week with another video from the DCC guy. Bye now.